My man, loved this interview with Todd Harper today from Generous Giving. I think probably one of my favorite parts is not only, well, my favorite part was the fact that he highlighted just the blessings that generosity brings and the different ways that manifests in gifts. And again, that's not just a financial thing coming back to you, that it's, that enriches your life and your relationships. And it's just such a beautiful episode that highlights the power of generosity. It was one of my favorite episodes, but also I really love the fact that, he talks about just the practical ways, and really what it boils down to is just do it, man. Just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you say? There's no such thing as a former giver. I
Yeah.
love that. We are really big on giving. It's a part of our businesses. It's a part of our lives. And this message is really, really important. I think, I know once you listen to this episode, you will be fired up to be a giver. It brings joy to people's lives like no other way that can be done. So go listen to this, enjoy it, and then go give.
See you. See you.
You're listening to Filling the Storehouse podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Stuart. And we want to walk with you on the journey to living the abundant life through faith, family, and freedom. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours. Together, achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to intentionally fill our storehouse.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Filling the Storehouse podcast. Todd, thanks for joining us. I'm really excited about this conversation. So for our audience, Todd Harper, we were connected to Todd through our mutual friend, David McKinney, out at NCF Orlando, National Christian Foundation, which is the organization that we use to set up all of our personal and our business donor advised funds. Todd, thank you for being here. Really appreciate your time with us. And I want to dig right into your story, if you don't mind. For our audience, could you just give a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Honored to be with you guys. I have, I guess, been in this world of Christian generosity, philanthropy now for 26 years. I got into this world as a former person with Campus Crusade for Christ. And so my wife and I, who met and married at Baylor University in the late 80s, were missionaries for 10 years, working with university students really around the world. In Texas, we lived in Yugoslavia for a year. We lived in St. Petersburg, Russia for 4. And then we came back to the States from Russia. And I transitioned into this world of encouraging people to be generous to kingdom causes, and did that for a number of years with Campus Crusade, or now known as Crew, and then transitioned, did a little stint for just a little less than a year in the hedge fund business, investing business, and then transitioned to go to work full time with this organization called Generous Giving that I had been a part of, one of the 4 co-founders of founding in the late 90s. And then went full time with Generous Giving, and have been there now for 22 years. And that has been quite an adventure that I think we're going to be talking some about. I'll make a little family intro. My wife and I have been married. We celebrated 35 years in August.
It's awesome.
We have five children. We're 10 or 11 days out from our 3rd wedding in 7 months. So
I'm sure that's been a very cheap end and beginning of the year, huh?
Exactly. But it's been a joy to see our kids marry great spouses and see the family expand that way. But I wouldn't exactly schedule it that way if I were in charge of it. So
Good call. Yeah.
That's good to know. I'll keep that in my mind. I've got 3, and I think their spread is enough, but they're close enough that there could be weddings that are simultaneous. So I'll have to make note of that and start putting in their head to space it out. They're 11, 9, and 6. So I've got a little bit of time to start really getting that refined. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations not only on an amazing family, all the kids and the weddings. I think that's something that Stu and I are we just emphasize so much is the and it's becoming just more and more apparent as we continue to do our effectively, it's our business, but it's a mission to really help men and to help ourselves become the best husbands, fathers, and friends possible. And it's interesting. In my first question, it's somewhat related. This idea that you can be those things and also run a very successful business and be an entrepreneur. But the thing I want to talk to you about the first question is really this misperception of money. And what I hear you saying is you give your life dedicated to Christ, you do mission work, but you're also a businessman, an entrepreneur, a founder of this amazing organization. And I think a lot of folks, whether they have a misperception of money, like money is evil, money is the root of all evil. Well, no, that's actually not the verse. It's the love of money. And this idea of being successful, quote unquote, successful with money, but also being generous and giving. I'm just curious from your perspective, because I'm sure you've been exposed to it so many times. Can both of those truly exist?
Yeah, they absolutely can. And it's a helpful kind of clarification around the misquoting of 1 Timothy 6, that it's the love of money, right? That's the root of all evil. And I think one of the traps for us who are ambitious and want to be successful is that we might not always be aware of the subtlety of how the love of money has captured our hearts. And I think that's one of the really powerful things about generosity, is that giving can break the power of money in our lives. And so, I've spent the last, more than 22 years working with successful and generous people, and they absolutely can coexist. Although I would say that it's still the rare case where people are both of those things. There are traps. One of my friends likes to say that earthly success could equal spiritual failure. And I think that's a pretty good reading of one of the key principles of Scripture that we don't tend to emphasize, right? But that there are risks and dangers associated with the handling of wealth, and especially if it becomes a higher priority than other things. And it's very easy for it to become a higher priority, right? That's part of why I'm in this work, is because that was very much my orientation. I wanted to be rich. I was a Christian. I was ambitious, and I spent a lot of time and energy in my early life trying to become wealthy, at the cost of prioritizing my relationship. Lord, thankfully, that kind of the Lord intersected my path when I was 19 years old to kind of reveal that. That's part of my story, but I'm still very much susceptible to the cultural message that bigger, better, faster makes you happy.
And I really appreciate you highlighting that, because I think there are just lies that a lot of us, especially men of faith, face, and we become afraid. Either we become afraid of success, or, as you highlighted, our focus is not in the right place. And to be able to, John Reinhardt comes to mind, the Gospel Patrons. He's the author of that book and founder of that organization. He, we had him on a podcast, but it's really that constant awareness. I think that's the key. And you really hit it. You really hit it well. Is being aware of, and then taking actions to fix, to adjust, to refocus on what truly should be the priority. And so I really appreciate you highlighting that.
Yeah, I think I'll add just, this building our lives on the foundation of Scripture is the best path forward. And I love the passage in 1 Timothy 6:17-19, which is about 10 verses later than the verse you quoted about the love of money. And it says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to place their hope in riches, which are so uncertain. Rather, to place their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up for themselves as a firm foundation. They will lay up for themselves treasures in heaven as a firm foundation, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. And I think that the subtle message from our culture, maybe not so subtle message from our culture, is that the life that is truly life is found in the accumulation of wealth and the uses of wealth that wealth affords. And I just haven't found that. I haven't found rich people who are happy in the pursuit of ever more material abundance. That's just in spite of what the culture says. And yet I would say that I have met scores or hundreds of families that are living open-handed generosity. I would say I've never met an unhappy, generous person. So I think that's frankly a stark contrast between the invitation of God for our lives versus what the world is selling.
That's so powerful. I think, I heard something also you said that you had it, and a lot of people have it to where they get so focused on building this wealth, about being successful in the world of money, so to speak, and materialistic things, that you lose focus on your faith. But I think you also lose priority and focus on your family, on your friends, like real friends, like true close friendship, and building those like close relationships. And David and I have seen that tremendously. I mean, we had a little bit of ourselves too, like as we were trying to build out our businesses and kind of to create, in this investment world, this real estate world, the key phrases are passive income and financial independence and financial independence, retire early. All these key like phrases that people hone in on. But what ends up happening is you get so focused on grinding and hustling and building and creating that you stop losing focus on having a relationship with your spouse or your kids or God. And I'm just curious, like, why is that? Like, what is it in our culture? And is it American culture? Is it a world view that's going on right now? Is it getting worse? Like, what have you seen is some of those reasonings behind it all?
Yeah, I think it's part of the human condition. The scriptures talk about the four soils, right? And the third soil not being fruitful because of the deceitfulness of riches and the cares of this world and the desires for other things. So somehow this was an issue 2,000 years ago in a much less materially affluent culture, right? So I think it's part of the human condition. I don't think it's distinctive to America, but I think there's so much opportunity in this amazing country that we live in that we probably are tempted with it even more in our, kind of materialistic, consumer-oriented culture. And so I think we need to be ever more mindful of it. I think that part of the reason it's so alluring to kind of get on that train, if you will, is it's a fairly easy thing to count, right? So it's hard to count how good my marriage is today.
Yeah.
Or tomorrow, did it get better? Did my relationship, relationships are so nuanced and long-term. And I can know today if I made more money than or I can know this quarter, and so I think there's we're susceptible to keeping score in the wrong ways. And so, yeah, I mean, we would probably all stack hands and say it's a bad trade to, kind of increase my net worth and lose my marriage.
Yeah.
Right. Like if I knew, oh, that's the trade. Okay. I don't want that trade. But you and I both know there are lots of us who struggle with making those decisions day in and day out that are building our net worth at somewhat of an expense to my marriage or my relationship with my kids or my relationship with the Lord. And the challenge is every day, right? Like I've got a choice to prioritize. What am I going to prioritize today? And they're not mutually exclusive, but they are in competition with each other.
Yeah, David, I can't remember the podcast guest we had, but we were talking about a similar subject, and I think he said something like there aren't key performance indicators for our marriage. Like we don't have like checks that you can check off to track the growth and the key performance indicators of your marriage with your spouse. I thought that was a pretty interesting conversation.
Yeah, I think that was Corey Carlson. I think.
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
Talking about that. Yeah. And Todd, I think what's one thing that you said is interesting too, and something that we've been talking to folks about is what a lot of us don't recognize is as you focus on building your net worth, if you lose your family in the process, usually a pretty terrible experience to go through, but your net worth also suffers significantly when you divorce, maybe to the tune of half or more. So I think, and we kind of joke about, but it's obviously not funny, but a lot of people don't think of it that way. They don't think of the cost at home and losing at home to what no kidding it will very practically do to your bottom line. This thing that you're so focused on building, it'll immediately, unless you've done something like put a prenup in place, whatever. But for most of us, there is a direct correlation and an immediate impact to this thing you're building. This image, this facade you're building, as soon as your spouse walks out the door and potentially takes the kids as well.
Yeah. And of course, very few of us set out to fail in our marriages, right? I mean, maybe there are some people in Hollywood that just get married, it seems, for a fling, but, most normal people don't intend to have their marriage end or fail. And yet, of course, it's a widespread challenge, right? I had an experience really before I went full-time with Generous Giving. So I was in my early 30s and was wrestling with a role that I was in that was not working for my wife and kids. We had 5 kids under 7 at the time. So it was just, and I was frankly too immature to say no to the opportunities that I had at work. And it was not working for my wife. Thankfully, she told me and said, hey, this is not working for me. But at the same time as she was delivering that message, I was sent a sermon by Andy Stanley that has been turned into a book. Maybe you guys have heard of the book, but it's called Choosing to Cheat. And this sermon was all about who and what are you cheating? And Andy's point was it's way easier to cheat at home than it is at the office. And we probably ought to flip that. And but in some ways we can get away with the cheating. What he meant was in terms of time and energy and attention, right? And we probably should be more willing to cheat professionally than to cheat in our, personal and relational lives. And yet we probably can all identify with the fact that it's easier to cheat at home because, well, we can make up tomorrow, but I got an annual review with my boss, whatever is in our heads that make us cheat in the wrong places, if you will.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I'd also recommend his podcast, the leadership podcast. Andy Stanley has an awesome podcast, about 30-minute episodes, really good. And I'm curious in what you just highlighted is there are things that we can do, there are actions that we can take to either reprioritize or show what is truly important to us. And I'm curious, how does someone practically shift from your advice or what you've seen? How does someone shift from a self-centered, net worth centric focus to a generous life? Because it's not just, I don't think you're born generous, and some people may be more inclined, but you're not just born to give away your money, right? And so how does someone practically make that significant life transition?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think the answer is to begin practicing generosity. So you guys probably know the verse Acts 20:35, where Jesus is quoted in the book of Acts as saying it's more blessed to give than to receive. And I like to say that I absolutely 100% believe that is true, and have observed lots of people who that's the fruit of their lives, that it's more blessed to give than to receive. But that statement is not experienced in the abstract or in theory, right? I can't experience the blessing that it is to give without actually taking the step of faith, essentially, to trust that God's going to provide for me if I give away some portion of what he's entrusted to me. So there is very much, unless you're just, fabulously wealthy, and frankly, people who are fabulously wealthy, I think oftentimes have a harder time giving. So it's not just about the amount, it's about a heart condition that actually steps into that truth, that it's more blessed to give than to receive, and begins to experience that reality for themselves. So another little saying that I like to say is that I've never met a former giver.
That's awesome.
So, really,
yeah,
because you don't do it and then say, yeah, that didn't work for me.
Yeah, it wasn't for me.
So I think that's and yet there's lots of people who struggle with giving. I mean, the statistics will bear out that, most Americans give virtually nothing. The average American, averaged over the whole economy is somewhere a little bit north of 2% of income.
Wow.
And so it's not normal to be giving. And yet the people that, I have had the privilege of rubbing shoulders with and frankly being influenced by are remarkably, incredibly generous. And the fruit of their lives, the internal reality of their freedom, purpose, joy, contentment that inures as benefits of kind of living this way generously in the world is, it's one of the most compelling evidences for me that the Bible's true. Because I've got to see that in others' lives and frankly my own life, as God has turned my heart from wanting to accumulate and be wealthy to really wanting to be a conduit of his blessing to the world. And in the midst of that, God has provided for our needs, but it's a total 180 shift in orientation. It's not about how much I can accumulate for my own comfort and security, but how can God use me? And there's nothing better than being used by the God of the universe to be a blessing to somebody else's life, and the fruit that comes from that, the relational fruit, the sense of purpose and being aligned with his purposes in the world. And that's really what my book was about, which was entitled Abundant, right? Jesus said he came that we might have life and might have it more abundantly. And we find that abundant life in giving ourselves away. That's kind of the upside down nature of God's kingdom.
That's amazing. Man, it gets me all fired up. It gets me excited to so one, can you tell us about generous giving? And we had kind of hit on it before we started recording about what generous giving is in comparison to what NCF is, and how kind of you guys work together. So give us a little bit of background about generous giving, and then talk to us about what a jog is.
All right. So Generous Giving is an organization that was founded in the year 2000. Our mission is to spread the message of biblical generosity in order to grow generous givers, especially among those entrusted with much. The unique thing about generous giving is that we have, for 22 years, been in the practice of creating environments where people are challenged to be generous without ever asking for money. So we were initially founded by a wealthy family out of Tennessee that for 15 years funded our entire budget. And so we were able to challenge people to give, like I said, without asking. So, generally, maybe almost always, when somebody's being challenged to be generous, they're being asked. And that's not a bad thing, but it can change, or maybe it does change the dynamic of the listener and the message sender, right? Because it's like, well, maybe I want to be generous, but I don't really want to be sold, or you've got an agenda for my life, and so I'm
I feel
resistant,
salesy, right?
Yeah. And so we've been able to kind of remove that dynamic in our interactions with people, and just talk about the amazing invitation of living a generous life. So tactically, the distinction between generous giving and National Christian Foundation is, one way to describe that is that generous giving, it answers the why be generous question. And we do that with a biblical worldview. So why, from a biblical perspective, ought we as Christ followers be generous? What are the benefits of that? What's God's calling? Why does he care? What are the biblical reasons for that? And then National Christian Foundation, or NCF, really answers the how question, specifically, kind of tactically, especially as you guys understand in your world of real estate. National Christian Foundation's kind of unique competency is helping people monetize non-liquid assets. So other than cash, bonds, and stocks, which are, kind of easily turned into charitable dollars, how do you gift a real estate asset or a tightly held business interest? So that's how they help with the how, right? And we've done, hundreds and hundreds of events together, primarily to transition to your question about jogs. What is a jog? Well, there's no running involved in one of our jogs, but jog's an acronym for Journey of Generosity. And it's generally an overnight retreat, like 22 hours long, where people are, it's a small group, 10 to 15, 16 people, where we see compelling stories of real life people living extraordinarily generous lives. We spend some time in God's word and a lot of discussion kind of around this idea of how do we live a more generous life? And that has created some, for most people who go through a journey of generosity, there's a switch that gets flipped. And I call that switch from ought to get to. And if that switch gets flipped, it kind of changes everything, because we move from a sense of obligation to a sense of opportunity. And all of the generous people that I know in the world have that switch has been flipped. They don't give because they have to. They give because they get to. And that's just a really, really fun place to kind of sit in that space and see the Holy Spirit change people's perspectives. And I would say that what we do at Generous Giving, and this is probably, most of your audience, is we help generous people become exponentially more generous. I actually really don't know how to get a non-giver to become a giver. Like, for one, they don't come to Generous Giving events.
Introduce them to Jesus, probably.
Right. So that's. I hope I got all of your questions in that response.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate it. David and I have been on this journey of giving. We haven't actually done a jog, but we created our businesses kind of behind the idea of giving. That they're all Storehouse related: Storehouse 310 Ventures, Storehouse Capital, Storehouse Mastermind. Filling the Storehouse, all of Malachi 310. We're going to give a tenth from our businesses to the Storehouse, and we try to promote giving. Not only in our families' lives, our businesses, but we try to promote giving to others as well. And we do these challenges. We'll challenge people to give, and we sometimes combine it with like a physical challenge. Hey, we're going to do 1,000 push-ups this month, and we're going to give. Well, people get excited about the 1,000 push-ups, but nobody gets excited about the giving. And honestly, like, we've had a lot of challenge with challenging people to give. We don't get much from the giving side of things. And so, I'm really interested in curious how we can promote giving to get people excited about giving, not be salesy with it, and actually have some success in it. I don't know how to do it. Like, we haven't been successful in it yet. I'm just curious from your perspective, like, how can we as business owners promote giving and get other people excited about giving? Do we just need to go do a jog with everybody?
Well, that's a great question. And, this is a cultural challenge, right? I mean, and you guys probably know the giving statistics. Each successive generation tends to be less generous. So this is a challenge for all of us. I do think, we got to get you guys on a jog, and you got to convene, some of your friends to experience that, because it is powerful. It does kind of reshape people's perspectives. And we've seen, some dramatic changes in behavior as a result of kind of engaging this biblical message in a little different way. Our style, if you will, is not prescriptive or pedantic. We're not telling people what to do. We're showing examples of stories of generous people that make, I think, people in the audience or in the experience say, gosh, I want to be more like that. So we kind of have created, by God's grace, an environment where it's the opposite of guilt and shame, right? It's flipping that switch, right, from duty to delight. And so that's part of the challenge, right, is getting people to actually practice giving and experiencing some of that for themselves. But I think I would tell you that the most challenging aspect of our work in the last 22 years, and it's never changed, it's consistent, is that what we're talking about is a felt need of almost no one. Right?
Yeah,
So
it's
the
hard
only
to
way
run a
people
business.
the only way people end up in a generous giving environment is somebody they trust invites them. Because there's lots of get rich quick seminars. There aren't many seminars on how you can give away your wealth. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, there's lots of marriage seminars, people who want their marriage to be better, but there's not lots of generosity. I mean, we don't have any competition, right? There's not like 6 different generous givings out there.
You got a monopoly on it.
And yet I think the thing that's so amazing that I get so passionate about is seeing what happens for people when they are liberated in this area. And maybe in some ways, like, especially for affluent people, affluent Christ followers who kind of realize, oh, this is why God has blessed me. This story was from last year, a participant in a jog who told one of my friends, so this is secondhand, who had invited her to her first jog. This woman was in her early 60s. And she said to my friend, she said, I have always hated my wealth because of the devastation that it's brought in my family. She was a second generation, super wealthy, She said, I went to bed last night and woke up this morning for the first time in my life excited about my wealth because of the good that I could do with it for others.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But, she's 60 years old. It was like she hadn't gotten that message. And I'm not sure another sermon telling somebody what to do, that doesn't seem to be cutting the mustard, if you will, in terms of heart and life transformation. And that's why I'm so energized by getting this message out and getting people into environments where their perspective and practice of generosity can begin to change.
I love that. I love the fact that, well, you've seen it. You've seen the practical benefits and fruits of giving, and just literally the weight of 60 years, an entire lifetime being lifted off this woman. I can't imagine the previous 60, if it had been awesome if that could happen at 30 or 20. I think the encouraging thing is it can happen for us tomorrow, right? Any of us, anybody listening, it can happen for us tomorrow. And I think, one thing that also is popping in my head, this is not, the statistics bear out for Christian giving as well. And they're not great. But I'm curious, the people that you see, is this a purely Christian thing? Is this a Christian audience that you're going after? Have you seen the significant, for those who potentially are not believers and maybe they aren't there in their walk, is this something that's possible for them too?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I love about God's truth, is that all truth is God's truth, and that it is more blessed to give than to receive, whether you believe in God or not, or Jesus is your savior or not. I think it's interesting culturally, probably lots of us have been exposed to this story of Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, who are, I think, both would not claim a faith or Christian faith, and yet they're almost giddy talking about their giving. And so that's to me, that's kind of evidence that it's more blessed to give than to receive, kind of regardless of what your worldview is. That said, the work that we do, I would say there is a quality to Christian generosity in some that is decidedly sacrificial, and yet those people would not describe it as sacrificial. You know what I mean? So I'm looking from the outside in, and it's like, oh my gosh, they're giving so aggressively that it's impacting their lifestyle significantly, right? I mean, we know lots of people who are reverse tithers, right? They're living on 10% and they're giving away 90, which is kind of crazy, right? Like most people,
awesome.
like that's a head scratcher. And yet when you realize that God really owns it all, the question really isn't, let me put it this way. The more mature steward asks the question, not how much should I give, but how much should I keep? If it's all God's, how much should I keep for managing God's money? And, I know scores of families that have answered that question. One of the stories we tell in our jogs is a family that answered that question 30 years ago in their 20s, and basically said, we're going to live a middle class, maybe it's upper middle class lifestyle. And if God prospers our business, then we're not going to see it as a call to raise our lifestyle, but to invest more generously in God's kingdom. Last year, they lived on about $150,000 in income and gave away about $22 million.
That's so cool.
That's it? Just 22 million?
That's it.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, that kind of stuff is crazy. And yet, like, that's been the unique privilege of my life, is getting to be friends with these kinds of people. And what I'm telling you is the fruit of their lives, the purposefulness in which they live, the relationships that they have in their family, in their business, in the organizations that they're investing in. I mean, it's hard to find the downsides. And I just firmly believe that we can't outgive God. And I don't mean that it always comes back in financial blessings, but in a harvest of righteousness, as Second Corinthians talks about.
Man, that fires me up. So someone listening to this episode of our podcast, they like get fired up like we do, and they want to get involved. They want to do a jog. What are the action steps that someone takes from listening to this to either going to a jog, getting involved, or participating in a jog, giving? Because can't people like go and do their own jogs? Like, explain that kind of process for us.
Yeah. So, number one, you can, of course, if you're interested in some of these stories, they're free on our website at generousgiving.org. And across the top, there's stories, and you can just click on stories. And there's, we've told dozens of these kinds of compelling generosity stories of real life people. So I commend that if somebody's intrigued and wants to kind of check this out. There's two other ways to kind of get involved or be exposed more if a listener is interested. One is you can actually sign up to do an online journey of generosity. So that was one of our innovations in COVID, was we had to do a lot of that virtually. And that's something that has stayed, because it's an easy way for somebody from anywhere to sign into a multi-hour interactive experience that is free, and just exposes you to the stuff we've been talking about. Another avenue is to host, to kind of raise your hand and say, I want to host a journey of generosity with some of my friends. So that would be a great example for you guys in Denver. Like, let's do one of these together, where you get some of your friends together, and we spend an overnight, kind of wrestling with this content and experiencing it together. And it's a super powerful way to grow in your own heart. And frankly, one of our clear purposes objectives of a jog is to spur one another on to love and good deeds. And that's kind of the whole design of the experience. So anybody can go on our website and kind of say, I want to host a journey of generosity, and Generous Giving will send a trained facilitator and the materials, the workbooks for any group to have this kind of experience. And the host is responsible for the venue and generally 2 meals, a dinner and a breakfast. And it can be kind of off-site where you're kind of away from home, or we also do them, kind of in town where people could go home and sleep at their respective homes, but come back, in the morning. And so the time frame, just so you know, for an overnight retreat is we start at 2 p.m, basically go through dinner and a session post dinner, and then in the morning 8 to 12 we're done by noon. So that's why I say it's generally a 22-hour experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you for that, Todd. I really appreciate the the insight into that, and I'm actually pretty fired up to get something like, I'm just thinking through who I would invite and the connection with the church and all the different things that you could do, because I think the most powerful part of something like this, again, is and we've seen this in our own business, is the in-person stuff. We have these virtual things that we're doing that's been life-changing and amazing, but I tell you, get people together around a common cause, and whether that's giving, whether that's being better for husbands and fathers and friends, whatever it is, you get people together in person, and it's powerful. It's powerful. And I know we're coming close to our end here, and I just want to affirm you. I am the fact that you've given your life to this purpose, the fact that you've given your life to help others to achieve something that they may not have ever achieved through generosity. And you describe the gifts, and it's not just a monetary receiving of outgiving God. It's just the blessing of the relationships and the depth and the richness of life and purpose and vision and generosity is such an amazing, life-changing, beautiful thing. And I'm just so grateful for you and for men like you who are willing to step up, take action, and help others to achieve something that a lot of us have, just never even experienced. So it's pretty amazing. So thank you, Todd.
You're welcome. You guys probably know it's a unique privilege to walk in God's calling on your life. So it has been an unbelievable joy to get to be on this journey and following God's calling for my life. So it's a privilege.
So cool. So cool. Well, Todd, we'll put, the link to the website, your book. We'll do that in the show notes. Hey, guys and gals, if this was impactful to you, reach out to Todd, get onto the generousgiving.org website, and schedule a jog. I think that's step one, right? Read his book, and share this episode. Tell someone about this episode. Tell someone about generous giving. Let's all go be more generous givers, and let's all go fill the storehouse. See you, friends.
Thank you, friends. Make it a great day. Go do something. Be generous. Go jogging.
Go jogging.
See you. Awesome episode with Todd. Again, just the power of generosity is it's so humbling, but it's encouraging, man. Like, I'm super excited to do one of these jogs, and really, we can all get better, right? We can all get better. I would love, when he talks about flipping the tithe on its head and reverse tithers, man, that would be such an amazing, amazing thing. But at the end of the day, it's not a passive exercise, right? It's not enough to say, oh, that'd be so cool. It's what are we doing practically to get there? And I'll tell you one line that he said, it just keeps resonating with me. And he talked about how giving can break the power of money in our lives. That giving is the mechanism to break the power of money in our lives. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, man. I think it's very, very interesting that, from a world perspective, we are just not good givers, and we give very, very little, to something that, we don't own anything. Like, we really don't own anything in this world. We are all going to die at some point, and it all goes away. But yet we give very, very little. What do you say? The average is 2% of American households It's crazy, man. It's crazy. So I hope this got you excited about giving a little bit more, about, just diving in and understanding the word a little bit more, and then taking action and go be a little bit more of a giver this year. Do it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think if we gave 3%, that'd be rad.
The world gave 3%. Yeah. Let's shoot for like 10.
Shoot for 10. 10 is the minimum. Let's shoot for 10.
I like
Go
it.
get it. Or no, go give it.
Go give it.
Go give it.
See you.
See ya.